outside the entrance. They were just dangling in the air. The tomb was still big enough to move my head around, and even move my arms freely into position. It was larger than the rest of the passage, but not that much. It was like sticking your head into a box. Everywhere I looked there were rocks, and not too far from my head. Any sound I made was muffled and dead. The narrowest part of the passage is about 10 feet in. At this point I was about 3.5 feet in. At about the 4-foot mark, I would have to commit to whatever position I felt comfortable in.
Are you on the stream?
Until the 12-foot mark, at which time the cave started opening up. So of course, it seems like the deeper they went in, the wider it started to become. So of course, the final piece was when he started crawling in. Again, this feels a lot like that Metal Gear Solid 3 section after you fought, like, the Pain. The Fear or the Pain, one of them. And I think it's the Pain, the B boss. And you're basically, like, crawling around the cave for a bit. This is what it actually really does feel like. So, yeah, I mean, in a narrow space like that, he's got his whole body in there. Anything could actually happen. Who knows if there's some weird, undocumented animal living in the background that could, like, just start eating your face off. I mean, this is one of those things where I don't understand it. I mean, again, to each their own, but I'm looking at this and thinking, just why? And of course, the infamous image everybody knows is this one of him in Floyd's tomb. So again, this is our character moving on through and through and through, and you can really see there's not much maneuverability going on. Like, the head at this point is pretty much stuck where it has to be. And there's like one side of his torso is moving up, and the other side
diamonds.
is just constricted. So,
ooh, diamonds.
Again, if you get stuck in here and there's something that happens in the back, this is how you die. This is the exact, like, this is your death position that you're already in. April 7, 2001. So, of course, first thing, here's a picture of B with the pipe we made. I took a picture facing away from the tomb. He's sitting on the rope bag that we used as a bed. So, of course, here's B sitting around into the cave, and, of course, this is where they're succeeding. Okay, at this point, their cave adventure was a bit of a success. I took an oath, I made a vow, I would not leave the cave until I made it through the passage, conquered Floyd's tomb. This would be the trip. It had been a long time since we had been out to mystery. We had been busy, though. We had made the tools we had talked about. It was fun coming up with the ideas for the tools. Also, we made a squeeze box to determine the best technique for getting through the tight spot. Plus, we knew about how much rock we needed to remove before we could get through.
Alright, I'm heading back up to the surface.
Our climb down to the passage took a little bit longer than usual since we had extra tools to carry. Once we got down to the passage, we immediately got to work using the scraping tool. So again, they show the first section of the passage almost laying down. And of course, it really did start to just open up over here. You got the feetsies and that dark corridor that we're about to get into.
Yeah, Fortnite ad while playing Minecraft.
I asked B how far he thought I should venture into the new cave, in light of the strange events that had occurred, the screaming. The dog weirded out. For the first time, he too toned down his enthusiasm as he remembered the noises. He slid the pipe through the tomb with the loosened tip on the end. He said I could use it as a weapon if I ran into an animal, or he also told me to make sure we could hear each other as I progressed through the cave. So of course, they decided to go just a little bit into it, and they found some crystal formations. And for instance, you can start to see like the crystal formations on the cave right over here as they're deeper into it. The passage continues on for another 100 feet or so before the cave opened up a little. It was at the end of the short, straight segment of the cave. At the very end of the segment, the cave made a bend to the left and opened up into a room. Just to the point where the room began, there was a round rock that appeared to be leaning against the wall. This seemed odd, but singular formations are common in caves, so it is by no means unique. I had crawled and stepped over a large chunk of rock that fell down from the ceiling, but this one was more round than the others.
You can listen to a creepypasta while I play, basically.
It was about 15 feet in width and about 30 feet in length. At the far end of the room, there was another passage leading straight out. As I entered the room, I had an eerie feeling. It was like the old saying that I felt like I was being watched, but again, the excitement of the new find faded, and the memories of the mysterious side of the cave crept back into the mind. Suddenly, I felt very alone. Fortunately for my ego, I was nearly out of time and had to back out to B before my half hour was up. I took several pictures of the room. I was going to get a feel for how long the next passage was when something caught my attention. On the left side of the room on the wall, about eye level, I discovered what appeared to be hieroglyphics. It was a strange drawing that almost appeared to be just part of the rock coloration. It looked like very crude representation of people standing below a symbol. And at this point, they were like obviously obviously anybody's going to be pumped. It's like you discovered older civilization stuff. So here's the drawing in general. They saw this, and this is, as far as I can say, is what believed to be the Blair Witch situation. So if you don't know the Blair Witch, it's a story from, I believe it's like the Jersey Pine Barrens, or like just the eastern coast, if you will. Basically, you go into the forest. If you watch the movie, you understand the Blair Witch is this character. You know, they go into the forest. They have the goddamn map, all right? They find these, like, little things hung up by trees, these little stick figures. And once you start seeing these trees, you're not getting out of the forest. The Blair Witch is hunting you down, and you're basically dead. So, of course, the last picture was this one right over here before they entered. Obviously, that room over there is the one where it's, like, 30 feet in length, 15 feet in height. So it's almost like they came across some, like, weird, like, home prayer room, if you will. April 14, 2001. A couple days elapsed before B found someone who wanted to explore the passage with us. B told me he talked to a few other people who couldn't make it because of scheduling conflicts, so they actually added a new person who's known as Joe. Joe, B, and I set out early in the morning to make sure we could spend all the time we wanted in the new page. Joe is a rather thin caver who had a lot of experience in caves. He said this might be the tightest squeeze he's been in, but it didn't bother him. He knew that physically he would be able to make it, since I was bigger than him and I made it. He was just as excited as us to get through and get caving. Maybe more. I couldn't believe how easy Joe slipped through the passage, said it was tight, and it sure didn't look like it. I told him how far to go and how long it would take, and then I sent him on his way. Now at this point they sent Joe into the cave alone, and after a while, B went into the hole and started yelling for Joe. No answer. Not surprising. You can't just hear each other when you are that far apart in a cave, when you are very far apart. We nervously awaited any sounds. Good sounds, that is. Joe-type sounds. The 20-minute time limit we had set passed. Then 25 minutes, I had no desire to climb back through the squeeze. My head was still throbbing, and the squeeze looked tighter than ever. Still, I knew I was going to have to make sure Joe was safe. Just as I was getting prepared to go back, though, I saw a light deep in the passage. Joe, I called out. Nothing. Joe! Still no answer. The light got brighter, and I could hear the noise of someone crawling across the broken rock that lined the cave. No. You okay, Joe? No, was his weak reply. Joe basically said no. Now, of course, they asked, you okay? And Joe was his very weak reply. When he got to the other side of the tomb, he said he was not feeling well. He quickly took his gear off and put them in the bag so we could pull it through. As I pulled it back through the passage, he began to climb through the tomb. We had no chance to question about what we saw before he was coming through. He quickly slipped through the squeeze and the hole, and we finally got to look at him. He looked terrible. His face was pale, and he was completely out of breath. The dust that covers the floor of the squeeze left its mark on his face and clothes. He had numerous small cuts and scratches on his face and arm. So then they asked Joe, who didn't want to stay overnight because they felt terrible. They headed home, and they couldn't get any more information. He just straight stared ahead. He was shaking like a leaf, and he said he was too not cold. When we tried to question him, his answers were short. I asked him if he saw the hieroglyphics. No. Did he hear the yelling? No. Did you see the round rock? No. Did he see the crystals? No. Of course, Joe is completely a shaken-up person. So, of course, on April 28, 2001, they actually contacted a local cave rescue group, and they got permission to borrow a low-voltage two-way phone. Now, of course, our characters are doing relatively fine. They were rigging up the rope to descend into the cave, and I felt something for the first time. I did not want to go into the cave. It was not a feeling of foreboding. It was not some premonition. I just had no desire to enter the underground world of Mystery Cave. And I shared this feeling with B at the time. Even though I had no desire to go into the cave, I knew we had to. Of course, that's probably your gut instinct, and if anything, you should listen to it. So, of course, at this point, they started to actually bring phones and even a video camera, where, of course, ladies and gentlemen, obviously you can imagine for a story like this, we were not lucky enough to get any video footage for this event. But even if we did, it's clearly notable that even the small formations were just too small to show up on video. Again, to understand, ladies and gentlemen, this is something in 2001. Video technology, especially low-level, low-light video technology, was not good enough to even be serviceable in a place like this. Of course, that's obviously assisting it with light. Of course, we weren't lucky enough to get any of that footage, and unfortunately, if we had that footage, maybe this might have added some extra realism. So, of course, as they were deeper into this passage, we got to the point where he didn't start hearing B until I reached the small area of the bottom of the drop. He was on rope and climbing out as fast as he could. I could hear him moving quickly and breathing heavily. So as they were progressing, eventually he heard scraping noises from behind them. It was loud, it was close, it was coming from the large room I had just left. I wheeled around to face whatever had made those noises. When I did, I lost my presence of mind and stood up at the same time. Crunch! My helmet crashed into the passage ceiling. My light broke and I was buried into a heavy darkness. Pain shot through my neck and back down my back, or then down into my back. The helmet had protected my head, but my neck was nearly numb from the impact. Fear enveloped me and my knees began to weaken. I slowly and involuntarily slumped up to my knees. I gently set the camera down as I began to see stars from the pain in my upper back. The scraping noise lasted only a second, and now the only sound I could hear was my own panic-inspired breathing. I was shaking violently as I sat there trying to figure out what to do. My mind was not thinking clearly. I honestly thought I was going to die right into the cave. And of course, he was wondering what we would ever do to figure out. And then he realized I had a phone. So at that point, he gets to the phone, alright, and at this point, makes out the call. I used the glow stick to light the phone reel with fumbling fingers. I managed to plug into the phone into the jack. I put the phone in my ear and heard nothing. The usual beeps to indicate connection with the other phone were not there. Terrified, I pulled the phone from the jack and reinserted it. Again, silence. The line was dead. What could have happened to it? I just talked to B. I found myself nearly sobbing with fear. I knew the only way out of here was back the way I came. Something was there.
Petconomics Savings Lesson 12. At Petco, better care for your pet means more savings for you. Now the ball's in your court. Vital Care by Petco makes it easier and more affordable to...
A third attempt at making contact would be met with the same result. And then, of course, another plan had to be thought of. Forcing myself to move, I pulled my body onto all fours and started to progress along the cave. I still held the glow stick in my hand, but I had ceased checking behind me. Now my focus was ahead of me. I reached the point where I could yell to B, but I didn't make a sound. I didn't want to stop long enough to talk. Finally, I reached the last stretch of cave before the squeeze. As I was crawling towards the beginning of the tomb, I called to B. He answered back. I screamed to him to get everything ready to go. He asked if I was okay. Since he hadn't heard me on the phone, he had gotten worried. I told him no, and to get everything ready to go. When I reached the rope, I flipped off my helmet and shoved it into my pack. For the first time I realized I had forgotten the video camera. Yeah, that was the twist, ladies and gentlemen. The whole video camera was forgotten. Of course, you can understand in the middle of fear, clearly that could be a reality, right? Like, hey, the guy had to try getting out. Fuck the video camera, life is more important. It was a fleeting thought. I cared no more about the camera than the passenger of the Titanic cared about the hat or a coat. I tied the pick to the rope and told him to pull through. Then I told him to start heading towards the surface as soon as he pulled the rope through. He asked why, and I screamed that there was something in the cave with us. Just as I started into the squeeze, I felt the wind in the passage increase, and with it the most nauseating stench I had ever experienced. Damp, rotting, rancid, putrid death. And I almost started to dry heave. This time, through the squeeze, I had no regard for the tightness of the passage. I was scraping my face, ears, arms, and shoulders. Every inch of the squeeze meant numerous scratches to my body, but I barely noticed them. My back was nearly paralyzing me with pain. Once again, I felt the rising need to vomit because of the odor being delivered into my nostrils by the breeze. Halfway through Floyd's tomb, I took a break to catch my breath. I was approaching exhaustion, and my respiration rate was through the roof. So, of course, towards the end, we had gotten to the top, and we had actually come free out of the hole like Floyd's tomb. So, of course, ladies and gentlemen, it's amazing how a person's state of mind can alter the perception of time. I'm sure it only took 4 or 5 seconds to sever the rope from the tree, but it seemed like an hour. When the rope was cut, the knot fell to the ground. While the end of the rope zipped across the rocks and over the edge of this cliff, the speed of it causing a humming noise as it went. As soon as the rope was cut, B let out a cry. He dropped the knife and fell backwards. Watching the rope fly over the edge brought the feelings in the passage back to me. I got up and headed towards the truck, and I noticed B was laying there, wide-eyed, staring at the point the rope disappeared. I called to him, which seemed to break his trance. He got up and hurried away from the tree. The cave, the nightmare. Neither of us said a word all the way home. And of course, the epilogue, which is the last page, 51901, is all the thoughts of our friend Ted. Now, of course, that's where it all just pretty much ends. So, nobody actually died in this scenario. Ted and B got away from the entire scenario. Now, of course, nobody died. Ted and B survived that entire ordeal. Although,
That was so scary. I heard footsteps running up behind me just now.
Of the unknown. Obviously, so they heard screams, they smelled
What the
putrid
fuck?
death, and of course, the dog definitely had some supernatural feelings going down into the cave.
Okay, that's gotta be a cow.
To understand, even their friend, Joe, was traumatized from this entire situation, and was very quiet coming back at it. Clearly whatever's in there could either be some demonic presence, could either be an actual animal that's actually out there to hunt you, who knows? But the point is, Ted survived barely coming out of there, to the point where whatever Ted was going up against, he had no chance of winning down in its domain. Now, Ted the Caper is actually a completely real story from what we know, and the only actual interview that I could find with the actual original author, the actual Ted, was from a YouTube channel known as Nick Bodick, currently sitting at 1.5 thousand subscribers. This whole interview has less than 10,000 views, and I figured one of the first original creepypastas definitely deserves more. So if you actually want to know about the thought process, the actual person behind the actual story, this is the interview you definitely want to check out. So yes, the true story of Ted the Caper, 100% true. Creepypasta history. And history indeed, because this story did become one of the original creepypastas that ever came out. And of course, to understand, this is a real story built out of Ted's actual caving journal as well. Hello, guys and gals, and welcome back to another episode of Creepypastas. Yes, Creepypastas, the non-gaming ones. This one is pretty lengthy, if you can tell by the time code below. I mean, holy crap, it's one of the longest episodes we've done. It's called 1999, and it's one of the greatest creepypastas ever. Trust me, you'll really enjoy this one. Because of its length, we're just going to dive right in. That being said, sit back, relax, and enjoy 1999. The year is 1999. That sentence brings me back to my senior kindergarten class when I was 5 years old, where we used to read out the date on the blackboard every single day. The year 1999 exists as a stain in my mind, however, as a memory that will not go away no matter how I try to forget it. 1999 marked the year I lost my first tooth, my first time on a plane, and unfortunately the early loss of my childhood innocence. That one memory that refuses to be wiped, it all started with that new, oral television. At the time, Pokemon was the latest fad to hit the school.
And of course it's Pokemon.
Games, stickers, and the most popular, the TV show. So of course, every time I came home from school, I would stay glued to the TV until Pokemon came on at 5. Pokemon! The only problem was that my dad watched the news at 5:30, and Pokemon episodes were back-to-back, which meant I had to miss an episode every day. Something I whined on and on about. My dad got tired of hearing me complain every day. That must be why he went and bought another television. My dad put the television he bought in my room. Unfortunately, it was just an old, small boob tube with rabbit ears even. It also had only 20 channels available, not including the channel Pokemon was on. I recall I didn't care though. I was just thrilled I had my own TV in my room. And after surfing through the channels, I came to the conclusion that only Channel 2, TVO Kids, was worth watching. So I watched that for a while. It wasn't for another few months until I discovered Channel 21. One day in April, I was flipping through the channels trying to see if Pokemon was on. I pressed Channel 21 into the remote, hoping that there were more channels, and to my delight, there were. My dad was surprised too, but he let me watch it because it seemed to have kids programs on. The channel was called Caledon Local 21, and later I found out it was indeed broadcast from the town of Caledon, Ontario, a town very close to my city. The shows I saw on Caledon Local 21 looked poorly made, and I never understood what was going on in them half the time. However, though, as I grew up, every time I thought of that channel, I realized more and more how messed up the shows were, and I had to ask myself, what the fuck was I watching? The following is a list of shows and episodes I remember seeing on Caledon Local 21. How I remember such detail even disturbs me, but I guess things like this stand out in your mind for a while. April 1999. Mr. Bear's Cellar, Episode 12. A very sketchy name if you were to look at it nowadays. The show featured a guy wearing a bear mascot costume who would get a new visitor into his or her cellar every day. It was always a kid. The show was filmed with a camcorder, not a very good one either. The police asked me a lot of questions about the show. The episode started with Mr. Bear sitting at a table. He just sat there playing for a bit until there was a knock on the door. The camera was then looking up the stairs to the door, where there was another knock. Mr. Bear climbed the stairs and opened the door to reveal two young children. One was a boy about my age, and the other was a girl who looked about 8. Mr. Bear danced in the light, and then started to talk to the kid. remember. Mr. Bear then led the kids into the cellar, which was quite dark, only lit by a small oil lamp on the table. I can't really remember that much more, except I'm singing a song which I couldn't hear too well either, probably because of that large bear mask. The episode ended with them playing hide and seek, with the kids hiding in a closet and Mr. Bear counting. May 1999, Soup and Spoon. I don't even think this was a show. It might have been just a special.
I can't hear you if you're talking.
All I know is I stopped watching Khaled and Local 21 for a while because I thought this show was too stupid. Especially since Pokemon now came out at 4:30 and 5. I don't remember much of this, but it showed a can of soup and a spoon both attached to strings swinging back and forth as if someone was holding them and dangling them in front of the camera. Interestingly enough, the show was shot in the basement, which was just like the one used in Mr. Bear's cellar. Like I said, I can't remember much. The only thing I can remember clearly was the end. The entire thing was only half an hour, and just included stuff I found stupid, such as a spoon chasing the soup around trying to eat him, sitting around it, each with a bowl of soup in front of them. They were sitting and looking at the camera with confused, almost frightened faces. The cameraman then held the can of soup in front of the kids and said, "Spoons ready?" And then it just stopped. July 1999. It was summer and I hadn't watched Channel 21 for a while. Until one day when I slept over at my friend's house, I decided to check it out again. My friend had gotten a TV in his room for the 6th. Last 9:30 was very late, and watched television. That's when I remember Channel 21 and brought it up to my friend. We decided to see if it was on, and to our surprise it was. They must have changed the broadcasting time. Mr. Bear's Cellar, episode 23. This episode was entertaining for my friend and I, mainly because it actually had swearing. However, now when I think of the episode, I realize something was definitely wrong when it was filmed. The episode started with the camera on its side, while it was facing Mr. Bear, who was walking upstairs to the cellar door. The camera then blacked out for a second before fading in, back upright and facing Mr. Bear. There was another kid talking to him, but this kid looked about 11 or 12. He was talking to Mr. Bear for a while, but I couldn't hear well, again with a crappy camcorder, until the kid started raising his voice. The kid was saying how it was late and sister had to go home. You could also hear more voices in the background. I remember Mr. Bear clearly saying, "Get the fuck out. You're not invited," with a deep voice, muffled by the bear mask. I remember my friend and I looking at each other and laughing at a mention of the forbidden F word. But the episode got weirder. The kid began climbing the stairs before turning around and saying how he was going to call the police. Mr. Bear began breaking into a run towards the kid, who started screaming and running as well. The camera then cut out, and that was the end of the episode. The channel then turned to static shortly after. August 1999. In August, I grew more curious to see Mr. Bear's Cellar.
No, it's okay.
The last episodes I saw was weird, and had swearing, which also made me think the show was meant for teenagers. Nonetheless, I flipped on to Channel 21 when my dad was busy. Mr. Bear's Cellar, episode 28. Apparently this episode had been playing the entire month of August. It was studied by, the police a lot. The entire episode was just Mr. Bear sitting in a chair talking to the audience.
Oh crap, I accidentally made two.
Cellar, if you do, please write me a letter at this address. The screen then switched to a white screen with multicolored letters reading the address and what was remained for the rest of the episode. And guess what? I actually did. I sent Mr. Bear, that sick bastard who portrayed him, a letter. I did it out of curiosity mostly. My dad was okay with it because he thought it was a legit kid show. But then again, he never saw any of what was on Channel 21. So my dad sent the letter to the address Mr. Bear said on the show. It stayed on all day anyway for some reason. It took about a week to get a response, which I'm surprised I did. I still have the letter I received August 15, 1999, and it reads, "Dear Elliot, thank you ever so much for your letter. I would love to have you in my cellar. We play games, watch movies, and go fire camping in the middle of the woods. Come to my house at," the police cut out its address, "Caledon, Ontario, Canada. I look very forward to having fun with you. Love, Mr. Bear." I cannot believe my dad never found this sketchy because he actually took me to the house. And then that's when the police became involved. Those endless questions, those pictures of terrified kids, the woods. This brings me to why I'm writing this blog. That psycho and his friends did some fucked up shit back then. And now it seems like he's trying to get into contact with me again. The entire police thing is coming back. It's brought back 1999 to me, over a decade later, and it's happening again. Telling me exactly what was happening in 1999, and I'll get to that. Those weird TV shows I was watching apparently were meant to attract kids to Mr. Bear's house. What Mr. Bear did shocked the entire town. My dad actually drove me to Caledon along with
address Mr. Bear left on the letter. The house was actually in the outskirts of the town, in the open farmland. I still remember that house. It looked like an older farmhouse that looked like, had been built in the early 1900s. The windows were all boarded up, and the house looked like it was in a state of disrepair. And as we walked up to the house, I remember my dad checking the address over and over again and looking at the house in disbelief. Then the door opened. I expected Mr. Bear to be at the door, but I was surprised to see a police officer emerge from that creaking doorway. The officer began talking to my dad, while I quickly asked if that was Mr. Bear's house. The officer's face cringed slightly and muttered, "Oh God," or something like that. He started talking quietly to my dad, so I couldn't hear, although my dad told me to go to the car anyways, and then we just went home. My dad was quiet the whole way, and I felt something strange had happened. My dad never told me what happened for a while. I forgot about it anyways, too. Channel 21 no longer came on. And when I asked about it, my dad would not acknowledge its existence. I think it was when I was 13 when I learned the truth. I remember Channel 21 one day and asked my dad about it. I guess he finally decided I should
get out of my room!
Caledon Local 21 was a local TV channel that ran from October 1997 to 1999 in the Peel region of Ontario. The entire channel was made from a house in Caledon, the one I visited, and run by a man who was not really known by anyone in the town. The channel was only available to older TVs because the signal was the only one that was picked up by rabbit ears or weaker frequencies. The man created all the shows on the channel, all of which were kid shows. He was Mr. Bear, and he was a mysterious cameraman. The real reason he created the channel was more disturbing than what was originally thought. As you might have already guessed, he kidnapped kids and held them in a cellar. But while most people thought he was a serial child molester, he really wanted to use the kids for another purpose, and the day I arrived, the man had fled his house the night before. The day before the police went in for their investigation, I wasn't the only one who was watching. Sorry for not answering any questions for so long. Back in October, I visited the house previously owned by the man who ran Caledon Local 21. 2 women lived there operating a daycare business. How ironic. Now to answer the questions you guys emailed to me. Question number 1. Who else watched Caledon Local 21? I know other people watched it for sure, including those kids who wound up at Mr. Bear's house. And after some Google searches, I found a few people on the Neo-Seeker forums who were discussing shows from Caledon Local 21. They talked about the kids shows I watched, but also 2 other shows I'd never seen before. A user named I Am Real Life seemed to know all the shows that were broadcasted on Channel 21, and here's the 2 I've never heard of. The Fallen Angel in Life, described as a fairly boring show with a guy rambling on and on in front of the camera about how we must please Satan and appease him before it is too late. And then Paint with the Soul, described as Blair Witch-like. Consisted of a cameraman wandering around a forest at night doing nothing particularly interesting. I'll always go looking for the conversation and see if I can,
Get your
get
child
that
out
link.
of my room!
But moving on to the next question, where's Mr. Bear, or the guy who wore the costume? If I did know, I would have said earlier, but I have no idea where
Alright, there.
in a 15 by 15 foot ditch deep within the forest. My dad's friend did not want to go into exact details, but I'm seeing him next Thursday anyways, so maybe I can extort more information from him then. That's all I have for now. Thanks for keeping that interest in my blog. I'll try to gather as much information as I can for my next post. I've actually been getting pretty interested in this myself. It should be my right to know what the hell happened. I'm sorry I haven't posted anything for a while. I kind of lost interest in the blog since I hit a standstill while looking for more information about the identity of the owner of Caledon Local 21. However, a few weeks ago I struck gold. I found some answers, surprisingly, from the father of a kid I used to babysit. He lives just across my street, and I used to look after his kids when they were younger. He currently doesn't have a job either. He used to live near the woods outside of Caledon and witness the owner's activity in the mountains. His name is Anthony Polo. When he lived in the small bungalow outside the woods, he would often venture into
So
smoke a
glow
joint of
squid.
marijuana or two before returning to his work as a wood craftsman. Polo described that sometimes he would hear voices of children coming from deeper within the woods, as well as a glowing light off in the distance. Polo told me these events started in late 1997. This is around the time Caledon Local 21 began airing. He apparently became annoyed by this happening every once in a while and actually went to investigate. Polo then described what the whole scene looked like when he got there. There were a group of kids, he said about 13 to 17, aged 5 to 12, gathered around a large fire pit with a burning fire. With them was a single adult. Polo talked to the man, noticing his unusual, unkempt appearance of a crack addict, as well as his constant twitching, and asked what he was doing out in the forest with children. The man said they were on a camping trip, something they did frequently. Polo, not suspecting anything, because Caledon is one of the lowest crime rates in Canada, simply left it at that, and told them to be quieter. Polo then paused for a while before telling me that it never became quieter. In fact, sometimes he heard loud chanting from the children in an unknown language. He didn't bother beating the man again as he was moving anyways. I told Polo that the man was probably the owner of Caledon Local 21, but he doubted it, as he heard that the man was moving to Pickering by several of the residents near the area. Here's what I know now. The man would take kids into the woods regularly for camping. The fire pit Polo described may be the hole the bodies of the children were found in. The children Polo saw are probably the ones found dead. The man moved to a city called Pickering, a smaller city east of Toronto. I'll discuss this with my dad's friend, the ex-cop, and see if this matches anything the police knew about the man. I also want to see if he has any other knowledge of what was aired on Caledon Local 21. Good news, guys. I talked to my dad's friend and he disclosed a lot of information to me. First, I asked the police had any information on the man who ran Caledon Local 21, and he replied that they have only had the same leads for years and never found a suspect. However, the Peel Regional Police do have some of the tapes found in the house Caledon Local 21 was broadcasted from. He took me over so I could watch a few. I guess I haven't said much about him yet. My dad's friend's name is Mitchell Wilson, a pretty nice guy. He seems to understand my thirst for knowledge on what happened during the late 90s in that house. He feels it was wrong that my dad went so long without telling me much. He took me to the Davis Road Police Station. If you don't know, it's the largest station in Caledon, and one of the largest within the Peel region itself. Each of the main stations around Peel have some of the tape. Unfortunately, I wasn't allowed to take any home for obvious reasons. Paint with the Soul, Episode 10, Garbage Thrown Away. Paint with the Soul is one of the shows that I Am Real Life and Ziggy 92 discussed on Neo Seeker. I told the police about this and they informed me that 12 episodes of the show were made and broadcasted between December 5th, 1997 and January 8th, 1998. Exactly as they described it, the episode opened with the cameraman wandering around in a forest. It appeared to be during the evening as it seemed the sun was setting. The cameraman walked along a path until he got to an area where there was a lot of garbage laying in the leaves. The camera looked around at the various wrappers, bottles, bags, and boxes, making sure each item got a few seconds of screen time. He spoke in a very timid, quiet voice, and I swear I've heard it somewhere else before, like on another Caledon Local 21 show. I could barely hear what he was saying, but he mainly talked about how humans are garbage, or something that had to do with saving ourselves by cleaning up the garbage, which would be us. It actually sounded really stupid, but still, a feeling of dread came over me, and I mean the forest was possibly where the bodies were found, right? Mr. Bear's Cellar, Episode 25. When the police administrator brought this tape in, I actually said, "Oh shit," and chuckled a bit out loud. Of course, I got stares from the staff, but Wilson explained to them about my little experience with Mr. Bear, and I still kept the letter he sent me. Like the previous episodes, this one included a guy wearing a bear mascot costume. Following him were 16 children. Some looked as young as 4, others looked like they were practically teenagers. And as the children entered, the administrator commented that this is the only episode that showed all 16 victims. The kids all looked rather content, except for this one who had visible bruises on his face. And unlike the other kids, he had a more fearful expression. He also looked about 11 to 12, which caused me to recognize him. It was the kid that asked about his sister, and subsequently met an unknown fate at the end of episode 23, the one episode I watched during July 1999. When I told the administrator this, he confirmed it was the same kid. He was also featured in episode 24, an episode that only aired once at 3 o'clock in July 1999. The police still have not found the tape. Mr. Bear then broke into song, singing about circus fruits and how good vitamin C was for you. I could barely hear the lyrics as they were muffled by the bear mask. The kids all drink their juice. More from episode 23. And the episode ends. And after viewing the tapes in possession of the Davis Road police station, I'm satisfied. But only temporarily. I still want to know the full story. The police just keep giving me the same crap about the creator of Khaled 21 being a fetishist pedophile, as well as an apparent cultist. I'll sign off for now. Get into university first, get information later. Hopefully I'll get back to this blog as soon as possible. April 17th allows you to drive a car by yourself, as well as with some passengers after 6 months. I of course took advantage of this and drove into Caledon for a little Sunday drive. Since I haven't updated this blog in a while, I figure I might as well visit the house where the infamous channel of my childhood was located. The house looked different than when I saw it last October. The place is no longer used as a daycare and just sat there abandoned. However, it did have a for sale sign showing that someone that still owned it wanted to get rid of it though. The abandoned house drew fuzzy memories from my mind, mainly the day my dad took me to visit Mr. Bear. A feeling of dread came upon me. What happened to the children while they were living in the house? I walked up to the steps in the front door and peered through the window. Inside I could see a near empty hallway with a few boxes at the end, and at the end of the hallway to the right was an open doorway, presumably leading to the kitchen. To the left were 2 doors, but apparently leading to the rooms visible through the windows outside. I wondered where the cellar entrance was located, and whether it had been sealed up. I walked around to the back of the house and found my answer. 2 wooden doors lying at an almost flat angle were padlocked shut. This had to lead to the cellar. Not wanting to hang around, you can imagine what was going through my mind at the time. I departed. Beyond the house, the empty field continued on until I reached a dense forest that lined the horizon. I wondered if that was a forest where the bodies of the children were found. I thought to myself, fuck it, and proceeded to walk across the field behind the house into the forest. The forest was oddly quiet, save for a few periodic sounds of a woodpecker drilling into a distant tree. I cautiously made my way deeper into the forest, not really caring about the fact that I had no idea where I was going. I don't know how to explain it, but it felt like there was something I had to find. I came to a thinner part of the woods, and a few small houses in the distance. Paulo's house crossed my mind, and I wondered if one of these homes had belonged to him. I neared a small clearing in which I could see 3 adequately sized logs gathered around a black charred area, showing a small fire had been lit there recently.
Hey, get the fuck out of our fort!
Those words nearly gave me a heart attack. I turned to my left and saw 2 dark-cloaked people running towards me. My initial thought was to run. However, as they came closer, they were really just kids in their early teens, possibly 13 or 14, maybe 12. And as they approached me, they realized my size as well. I'm 6'1". While they could have been no bigger than 5'8", one might be 5'7", we said, "Get the fuck out," the larger one, who was wearing a Slipknot shirt, had said half-heartedly. I stood my ground and shrugged. The shorter one, who was wearing a Metallica shirt, swung out with a butterfly knife and held it in my direction. "No, you wouldn't want to," I said in a deep, serious tone, trying to sound as badass as possible. I pulled out my cell phone. The 2 kids withdrew, the one in the Metallica shirt putting away the knife. "Look, dude, we don't like people in our fort, so can you just go?" the one in the Slipknot shirt said, obviously intimidated. I had no business in the forest anyways, so I uttered out a simple, "Fine," and turned out, before I realized I had a great opportunity. Did either of you hear of a guy who murdered a bunch of kids in these woods about 13 years ago? I asked the kids. The 2 looked at each other in confusion before the one wearing the Metallica shirt answered, "Yeah, everyone knows about that guy," he said to me as if I were stupid. The kid in the Slipknot shirt continued, "He still lives around here in the storm drain. My big brother's friend says he saw him in a bear costume once wandering around the forest at night." My instincts told me this was probably a lie, as the owner of Caledon Local 21 is probably long gone, only existing as Spokesman in the smaller isolated community. However, as a human, the thought of the mysterious unknown sparks interest within. "And where is the storm drain?" I asked, just out of curiosity. I actually didn't believe the kid's story. The kid in the Metallica shirt stared at me for a few moments, his eyes seemingly full of annoyance yet curiosity for me. "You're not from around here, are you? Why'd you even come here?" Now, I do admit I was slightly startled by the nature of the question. However, I figured I might as well explain why I was there, just in case people mistook my intentions. I told the two kids about my experience with the man at Caledon Local 21, and that I had to come to maybe seek out some sort of closure. Though even I wasn't exactly sure. The kids seemed familiar with the channel as they smiled and looked at each other when I mentioned it. They also became more understanding and gave me a detailed description of how to get to the storm drain. Shortly after, I decided to just turn around the way I came and back to the house, leaving the kids at their fort. But now you're probably wondering how I left just a detail out about what the kids told me just now. Is it because I'm choosing to conclude what I've gathered now? Here's what the kids told me in detail. The storm drain lies ahead of the kids' fort, the same direction I was heading. The drain ends at a small river, where excess water is drained out. Near here is a small playground. The kids told me people rarely use it. The man supposedly lives in a large pipe that rainwater drains out of. People have seen him, although always either wearing a bear mask or the mask with the full-body bear costume. I do not believe this is true, and in fact simply a myth made by the residents of Caledon. The story does not seem plausible in any way. Why did no one call the police? Didn't this guy look suspicious? And other questions like these leave the story invalid. I may visit the storm because I want an excuse to visit Caledon again. So this blog doesn't go. No more tapes to watch. I don't know what to talk about anymore.
Okay.
Thanks for continuing to support me in my blog. I know many are looking forward to more information about what happened in Caledon during the year 1999. So I will do my best to continue my research into the topic. Elliot out. Wow, nearly 5 months since I last updated. I'm guessing everyone pretty much thinks I was dead, right? Thankfully I'm not. But in all seriousness, I really have been busy these past few months, and a blog about something that could have killed me as a kid is a little low on my current priorities list. As of now, I'm living in Waterloo, Ontario, attending the University of Waterloo for computer engineering. Yeah, McKean. As you can imagine, engineering is no walk in the park, so obviously I nearly forgot about this blog, but as you can see now, I'm back. I remembered to visit the storm drain the kids from the Caledon Forest told me about. It was out in a clearing between the wooded areas, nearby a marsh. Unfortunately, I found absolutely nothing save for a turtle that retreated to its built-in home when it saw me. I snapped some pics of the pipe, which I posted as well. Also, let me tell you, it's not a storm drain, like they said it was. It was a simple pipe, possibly channeled the nearest access water from the marsh. When I returned from Caledon, however, I simply kept putting off uploading everything until I forgot about my blog. It just didn't seem important anymore. Please forgive me. It wasn't until only recently that I'm now interested in my case again, and on September 10th, I received an email from this email address. returntheb@hotmail.com. Funny, am I right? Well, it gets better. I'm going to copy and paste the exact email this guy sent me. Dear Elliot, my dear boy, I've missed you so ever much. Oh, how you've grown. Your twinkling eyes have stayed the same, however, those eyes looking for adventure. Oh, how imagining them brings warmth to my old bare heart. The day you came to visit me, I felt so happy. I wanted to go out and pick strawberries. You told me you would come looking. Oh, yes, you told me you would come looking. Now it'll be soon. You won't be so lonely soon. I'm ever so sorry. I couldn't say hello when you came to visit, not once, 2 times. Do not fret, however. You will soon finally get to play with the other children. I'll try making my cellar even more cozier than before. 100 fuzzy hugs, Mr. Bear. Now,
This story reminds me of fucking William Afton.
Just reading it creeped me out, but because of it, I'm now full of this new interest to continue my blog. I guess it's just trying to pursue the mysteries I've always questioned. Now, my roommate knows about all this. He thought the letter was real.
Okay, I'm getting out of this cave. I'm a little terrified.
But then I shrugged it off, and so did he. I mean, what are the chances of it being real? How would Mr. Bear know when I went to Caledon on those occasions, more or less, know my email, or me still be interested in his cellar? I'm gonna send a reply to return to B. Wow, just looking at the email address, you can tell someone wanted to freak me out. It didn't really work though. Although, to whoever you are, thank you for sparking my interest back into the full matter. Maybe I can find out more about what happened to Mr. Bear. Hopefully, because although I didn't buy that email, part of me still feels anxious. Thank you for all those who are still following me and have become avid fans. You are also why I'm choosing to continue this. Thanks, guys. Wow, I can't believe this blog hasn't been deleted yet. I haven't posted anything for so long. I have my reasons I'd rather not discuss it. It's been rather traumatic for me. Some of you were right. I shouldn't have gone back trying to relive the mysteries of my childhood, but I couldn't resist. It's been over a year since my last post, and a lot had happened. Let's recap where I am right now, with regards to the whole Mr. Bear incident. ReturnTheBeat@hotmail.com is no longer in use. I tried replying to the email, but I got no reply. I tried again back in March, still no response. I've actually moved up to Ottawa, the capital of Canada, for those who didn't know, for university, so I haven't been back to Caledon for home or in the Peel region for a while. I had my reasons for leaving, as you could guess why. I've had to make a new email account because people keep prank mailing me pretending to be Mr. Bear. Thanks a lot, guys. Why have I ventured back to this blog? Mitchell Wilson, remember my dad's ex-girlfriend, gave me a phone call on the 23rd of October about a tape that was found in a branch of the Brampton Public Library. Brampton is my hometown, in case you haven't picked up on that. He claims he isn't allowed to either, just discuss the content of the tapes with me, because it's still evidence, but he asked me to come check it out when I return home. The tape got the gears grinding again, because we all know what was the last tapes I saw. I can only imagine what can be on it. I'm guessing it must have to do something with Caledon Local 21. I guess I just want to say thank God and thank you for anyone following it. I don't know when my next venture will be, but when I see the tape, I'll write what I find. I don't know what to expect, but the idea of seeing another tape has got me interested in the whole mystery all over again. Elliot. It's been a long year for me. University has been giving me the usual sleepless nights, especially since I transferred to Ottawa, which is the place to party. Sarcasm. But now I'm back home, with my dad in Brampton, the town I grew up in. I got home on the 18th of December, and visiting with friends and family. Or at least that's what I would rather have done. That festive holiday cheer that I usually have at this time of the month is absent. To answer the hundreds of emails and comments I got, yes, I did see the tapes that my dad's friend promised to show me. The tapes, however, act as a curse. I want to know more, yet I want to know everything. I couldn't help it. I needed to see those tapes. Not for myself, but for all of you guys who are just as intrigued as I am by the ominous man in a bear suit from my past. However, after viewing those tapes, I feel the pit of dread deep inside me once again. The feeling where I know that all those kids in the videos are dead, that I could have been one of those kids, and that humanity is a dark, dark place. If you haven't skipped the paragraph for the juicier details below, thank you for listening to my ramblings. On Friday, Wednesday, January 1st, I called Mitchell Wilson and asked if there was a time where I could come by and view the tapes. Things were pretty slow at the station because of the snowstorm, so he said I could come down any time that day. The tapes were located at a branch not too far from me. So I braved the slushy roads and terrible Brampton drivers and made my way to the Peel Regional Police Station, located at the Branglia City Center. I met Wilson at the front desk, where he then led me up to the second floor and onto a small office. He instructed me to have a seat and wait while he went out and got the tapes. Before leaving the office, he returned to me and said, "I know you're curious, but you sure you want to do this?" Of course I did, or at least thought so. Besides, Wilson's friend had pulled a lot of strings to get me in there, and I didn't want to waste the opportunity. 30, Mr. Bear Cellar. Never ceasing to disturb me, especially after what happened when I was younger. The episode took place outside in the forest at dark, making it slightly hard to see, especially considering the quality of the film, a trademark of anything from Caledon Local 21. The episode started with the camera being held in the paws of Mr. Bear, aiming it at himself. The bear mask, it looked more sinister in the shadows of the trees. The unmistakable muffled voice spoke up. "Hello, children. Today, I'll be doing a wonderful thing for my friends. I'll be delivering them to a faraway land, where they will surely be happy." Mr. Bear turned the camera around to show an ATV with an attached trailer. But what stood out the most was that the trailer contained 7 motionless children lying side by side. This here is the first load, but soon there will be more on the way. Mr. Bear turned around and pointed the camera at a large burlap tarp spread on the ground. He picked the tarp up, revealing a large hole that must have been at least 12 feet deep and maybe about 15 feet wide. The rest of the episode consisted of Mr. Bear taking each kid and dropping them into a hole. I asked Wilson if they were dead, to which he shook his head. Not yet. Soon all the kids were in the pit. Some were in awkward positions due to being tossed in, but they remained unconscious. Vitamin C will surely help these children on the great journey that awaits them. Mr. Bear mentioned as he panned the camera towards multiple bottles of gasoline beside a bush. The camera zoomed on the bottles as Mr. Bear hummed before the episode. Wilson revealed to me that there were 7 of the 16 victims gasoline is what the man playing Mr. Bear used to light them on fire. A pit full of burning children. Who the fuck would do that? The feeling of dread found me once again when I realized I could have been one of those kids. Wilson then explained to me that he'd previously lied. However, he felt that I wouldn't be able to handle the disturbing or graphic nature of the episode, and you know what? Maybe I can't. I don't even want to see it, I'm satisfied. But it just needs some time to get myself together. The thing is, the man who ran Caledon Local 21 is still out there. More to come soon. Once upon a time, there lived a boy named Elliot. Elliot was a clever boy who loved playing with his friend. One day, he watched a lovely television show about a bear and his children friends. The children loved helping each other, as good children should. But they also loved the bear. The bear loved the children, since the children were so good at helping him and the fallen angel. The children and the bear wanted to play forever. But the fallen angel needed even more help, so the children had to give the ultimate sacrifice. Because that's what friends do, Elliot. They help each other. Help us, Elliot. Burn with us, Elliot. I want you, Elliot. He wants you, Elliot. Come back to my cellar, pretty please with sugar and icing on top. Mr. B.
Well, this is probably one of the longest creepypastas we've done, and you know what? This is fucking amazing. Because I won't lie, I haven't had that itch for a while when I read these. You know, that search for the truth, that curiosity here was captured very beautifully. Now, this does hit close to home. Hell, I live in Brampton and I work in Toronto, and Caledon is like an hour away from me. And I've been there for work at times too. It's crazy, and you know, just location-wise, it all fits perfectly. Now, the TV channel doesn't find out anything about analog television broadcasting. It is possible over the air. You need some specialized equipment to do it. Not really specialized, it's really cheap to even get. So obviously, you could transfer the proper bandwidth over the airwaves and go to the rabbit ears, as they so elegantly put it. And trust me, it's easy to set an analog channel. Hell, if you want a video, I can do a step-by-step guide on how to create your own television channel. Hell, it could be on TV, but, you know, that's a whole different story. That's entirely possible, and from a realistic standpoint, for a guy like me who works in television and film, I know it's entirely possible. That is a darn secret, but that's, again, pretty far-fetched, because people living there are super nice from my personal experience. But the bear, on the other hand, is a fucking super creepy mess. I mean, when you think about it, it's not like it's trying to be creepy like bullshit like that, but it's picturing just a man walking around in a fucking bear costume or like a bear mask. It's just super weird. It's surreal when you think about it, just living in a pipe and picture that. Now, the lack of info also, you know, makes sense. Unlike the States, Canada's a little behind in the TV sector. Now, today we've all caught up, but this is, again, back in the day, and even then, the desire for sensationalism in Canadian media is not so high as it is, you know, in other parts of the world. So, it does make sense why it's not really there. Now, emails are sent later, and people are met who've, you know, seen Mr. Bear. So what doesn't make sense is that there's no desire to track the emails if you're really all interested in it, or really a rush to further pursue the, you know, alleged people who've seen the fucking bastard. And even after all this, if this were to exist, there should be some articles on it with legitimacy, which I don't see, but this is a creepypasta, so thank the Lord this never actually occurred. Maybe it did, I don't know, hopefully not. But that being said, I won't take up too much of your time, and I'll ask, like I've always asked, is what would you rate this, and what would you change to make it better? This has been another episode of Creepypasta. If you like what you saw, like, comment, and subscribe. This is Moon the Heart. I am out. Hello guys and gals, welcome back to another episode of Creepypastas. Creepypastas soon indeed, because we are doing a sequel to one of my favorite creepypastas, abandoned by Disney.
Oh shit.
Room Zero. So this is a sequel.
I remember Room Zero.
Let's get right in. I am hyped up for this. Let's see what Room Zero is all about.
I actually played a Little Big Planet map based on that creepypasta.
Top right, just
I can't beat it though.
but this is Kingdom Hearts 2 for the PlayStation 2. This is my first time really playing the Kingdom Hearts franchise. The gameplay left over from that. It's a really nice game through it because of all the Disney stuff. But if you haven't tried out the series, try it out. I'm really enjoying it. This is quickly becoming one of my favorite franchises from Square Enix. I can't believe I haven't played this before. With that being said, if you ever want to win games on the screen, I'll mention it. Sometimes I'll have the name keyed on, and it'll be in the description below. So with that being said, let's get right into Room Zero. It's been a while since I've written anything related to the Disney Corporation, and I'm sure you can understand why. A lot has been going on since my last post. I've received a lot of questions and concerns from folks who read my first-hand account of Mowgli's Palace, a resort that was built and abandoned by Disney.
I want to thank everyone who mirrored my post. It's been taken down by a few places, mostly corporate sites that were easily leaned on by a larger power. However, for every new topic or disappearance popped up, this is something they'll have to face. There's no turning back for them. None for me either. I'm definitely being followed. For the first month or two, I chalked it up to paranoia. Any casual glance or half smile in my direction set me off. Hair standing on the back of my neck and everything. The first one, or rather, the first one I was actually able to spot was a telephone worker milling around my apartment complex. He was middle-aged, doughy, dressed just as you'd expect. But everything just seemed off about him. I couldn't place it, but I knew this wasn't just my imagination acting up. He was awkward and out of place, not somebody who was comfortable doing his routine job. I followed him around the corner, only to lose him there. When I turned back to go home, there he was, staring directly at me, about 10 feet behind me, expressionless and cold. Exploring? He asked. That was all he said. There was an accusing tone in his voice. Tell me, what blue-collar phone jockey does that? I guess that's the worst part, never feeling safe, never feeling alone. That and the occasional Disney merchandise left somewhere for me to find. Little rubber Mickeys in the mailbox, a Disney Adventures magazine on my bookshelf. They hide little Mickeys everywhere. 3 circles, one big, 2 small, in the silhouettes of the famous mouse's head. I started keeping a running list of Mickeys I found. Coffee cup rings on my coffee table, 1 big, 2 small, colored glass bottles left on the doorstep viewed from the top down, all red by the way. Graffiti on the wall on my way to work, a huge earth, small sun and moon in the proper locations. They're everywhere. People have emailed me about this as well. If you repost anything I have to say, you're going to start finding those sons of bitches outlines. I guarantee it. The best one by far, one that actually made me laugh because of the horror of it all, was a drawing in chalk next to my car. I was taken aback at first, walking through the parking garage, keeping an eye out for people following me. The outline seemed a perfect match for, well, a murder victim. You're probably familiar with it if you've read my past posts. Written in yellow paint, I'm sure with a single word, retract. The only good thing that has come out of all of this is that I know I'm not the only one who's seen something they shouldn't have. I'm not going to give their names because, well, if I have to tell you why, you haven't been paying attention. Researcher goes to Disney parks wherever he can all throughout the year. He's not going to have fun, enjoy the ride. He's looking for the gas cops. There's been a long tradition, apparently, of people reporting strange patrons throughout the park. Silent, motionless, staring patrons of every age, shape, and size. Men and women, adults, children, and teenagers. All wearing Disney-themed gas masks. See, way back then, Disney would get tons of complaints about oddly dressed folks following others around the park. Folks who would then merge into crowds and disappear. Later on, the gas masks caused folks to draw their conclusion possible terrorists or bombers, and that had started flowing. All these reports most likely went straight into the trash can. I know I can't find any sign of any such occasions reported on by the media, although you should be aware of the fact Disney can pretty much control its press. Like, he goes to the parks, talks to a few people, and tries not to draw any attention to himself. He'll just ask 3 or 4 families if they've seen his friend who wears a quote-unquote funny mask. He has yet to see a gas cop for himself, though on one occasion, a child pointed him towards Frontier Town. As he raced through the crowd, he heard a single voice ahead cry out, "Mommy, I want a Goofy air mask too." A fellow I'll call Lifeguard worked in a Disney water park from 2001 to 2003. He stood at the top of a huge water slide and made sure none of the kids got too rowdy. He passed the kids through one at a time, telling them over and over again to be safe, keep their arms in, and so on. One day, as he tells it, the fat kid goes down the tube and doesn't come out the other end. He sent 2 or 3 kids after. The whole thing moves at a steady clip, so naturally you'd expect that if Fatty got stuck, the kids that followed him were stuck too. Not so. Only the big kid disappears. Everyone else comes out the other end, cheering and splashing like nothing's wrong. Lifeguard shuts down the slide, much to the aggravation of the kids waiting. Before he can go through any of Disney's strict procedures, splash! Fatty finally comes out. Staff members pulled the kid out of the water. He sank like a stone when he hit, his skin already blue and his eyes wide. All he would say was, "No face kids," and "Stop squeezing." The kid was okay, in case you were wondering. He got carted right off to the medical center when Lifeguard was told to open the slide back up. He made a big stink about how it clearly wasn't safe. Despite his complaints, though, he was threatened with firing and begrudgingly opened the slide again. From that point on, he kept a closer eye on the kids. Every so often they come out in the wrong order. Never as stunned as the fat kid, though. but always with a vague look of concern, a dreamy half-stupor that seemed as if they were trying to figure out what was reality. They'd take on some water and choke a bit, but they'd never come back up to writing it. I read his emails, with the same sort of unease you might be feeling right now. I wanted him to share his story, but in the end he didn't want to expose himself, that way. And I can't blame him. Snow White, which wasn't the actual role she played, she was a character in the part. She had a nice little tidbit for me. You know what happens when a costume employee drops dead in a suit? Like, 1 second he's taking a picture with little Jimmy, and the next, he's had a fatal stroke. A second costume mascot in the area has to sit with a corpse on a curb or bench and wait for the designated dry cleaner, quote unquote, to arrive and cart the body away in a discreet manner. All the while, patrons had no idea they're sitting with a dead body for photo operations. Feel free to check your photo albums at this point. That was bad. But another fellow, who we called Janitor, went completely off the creepy charts. Disney World, and probably others, is built with a series of underground tunnels just below your feet, 3 stories worth. Anything and everything you can imagine is down there, for use of the employees only though. They're called utilidors, utility corridors. Basically, that's the reason you don't see characters out of place or janitors wandering through the park. They pop in and out of hidden doors and travel a concealed town you're walking on. Janitor told me something that might be common knowledge, but was nonetheless news to me though. Walt Disney had several apartments built into its parks. There's one above Cinderella's castle, there's one in the Pirates of the Caribbean ride, and they're all over the place. More than that, there are nightclubs, a movie theater, bowling alley, much more. All behind doors built right into the whimsical facades you pass by without a second look. Club 22 is one such area. If you have the cash to join the exclusive club, which you most likely don't, then you'll have access to it and much more. Club 22 is a place where anything goes. Disney Company calls these places dark zones. Spots where the squeaky clean visage of Mickey Mouse gives way to drinking, drugs, and yes, sex. Conversely, the rest of the park is the bright zone, with a few gray zone utilidors between. As far as Janitor has said, it wasn't always that way. It was more of a slow decline and a gradual relaxation of social norms within that elite group. The reason he knows all this, you may have already guessed it, he's cleaned it all before. Dark zones. After a lengthy background check and a non-disclosure form, Janitor moved up from the park attendant to one of these dark zone cleaning crews. Now, before you get some satanic human sacrifice vision in your head, Janitor saw nothing of the sort. Lots of empty alcohol bottles, yes, he used condoms scattered like deflated New Year's balloons. Oh yeah, he cleaned up his share of blood, piss, and vomit. But it was all down to the unrestricted behavior of patrons, as opposed to any sort of cult behavior. At least that's how he sees it in retrospect. All that trash, that profane shit, went into a furnace and mingled with the smoke of a quaint cottage's chimney. If you've been to Disney World, you breathe an ultra-condensed sin. Backing up this information was someone we call Hammer. Hammer mailed me the old-fashioned way. Though I don't know how he got my home address, he sent me photocopies of work papers proving his employment, with the instructions to burn them when I was convinced though, which I did gladly. Hammer worked around the Disney World park, doing demolition and construction. At one point, he approached a superior regarding some strange construction plans. There was a wide rectangular area marked off on the blueprints, about the size of a supermarket. The area was left unnamed and only bore the words, "Do not dig." Not only was the superior in the dark, but he was super fucking purposely in the dark. He didn't want to talk about it, didn't want to know about it, and ended the conversation with, "This space intentionally left blank." Hammer didn't get it. The area seemed like a waste of space, and it was directly conflicting with the work his team had been given. He started poking around the area on his off time, found only a derelict steel door, and a gray span of concrete just beyond. It was a supermarket's worth of blank gray floor. Soon after, Hammer started picking gas cops out of the crowd. Unlike all other reports, the people, the things, would stand in full view of the guy. They'd cluster together in the distance, or they'd just be pressed against the wall when he turned a corner. He said they moved weird, like they were weak or injured, like a deer that had been run down by a hunter and can't flee anymore. The gas masks, the Disney characters' faces with filters jammed in, he noted that they seemed wet on the inside, like condensation on a car window. Tiny beads of water glimmered behind the glass, making it impossible for any of them to actually see. Probing further, Hammer started asking questions of anyone and everyone who had been working in the park for a decade or more. hit dead ends throughout until he was directed to Ida, an elderly woman who worked in a restaurant on Main Street. She'd been there since way back, and though nobody had the balls to ask directly, everyone knew she had plenty of terrible stories to tell. Hammer asked about the empty space, then about the gas mask customers, and at first he thought he would receive the same non-answers he'd gotten so far. She was quiet, very eerily quiet. Room 0, she crowed, a single shaking hand placed to her cheek as if she were a little girl, fearing a father's punishment. She didn't meet the man's gaze for the entire conversation. Room 0, as it turned out, was yet another hidden room, just like the apartments in Club 22. However, its sheer size and a spot deep beneath the park set it apart from any of the fun dark zones. It was a bomb shelter. Room 0 was built to withstand a massive attack, be it conducted by foreign or domestic enemies. And Room 0 was to be stocked with enough rations to feed the entire park's average number of patrons at any given moment, and house a smaller yet lavish panic room for any of the Disney higher-ups. See, during World War II, official Disney gas masks were actually produced, though, for children to wear in the event of an attack. The idea was that it would be less scary for kids if Mickey's face was emblazoned on the wartime safety device. Yes, I know the obvious problems with that. During the Cold War scare of the 60s, when Disney World was constructed, Room 0 was stocked with similar masks as well. Whether they cared about the fears of children or just callous branding, the things found their way down there. What's more, some genius decided the kids would then be frightened by the gas masks their parents wore, and so all masks, adult and children, were made to comply to this insane standard. Ida described it as treating a wound with lemon juice. None of this explained what Hammer had been seeing, though. Not only the seemingly supernatural appearances, but the emptied-out room as well. I've been in there, he explained. There's nothing but a cement floor and 4 walls. No. Ida shook her head and covered her mouth, stifling a sob. You've been on top of it. Someone or something surrounded the alarm one day. When the park was at full capacity, the warning was clear. It was supposedly an air attack, secretly ushered everyone down to this tremendous shelter. There, they were ordered to put their masks and hunker down for the duration of the assault. Everything was quiet for about 30 minutes, save for the crying children and frightened whispers. No one wanted to die, and so they were thankful in a way for this strange measure of safety. Then, the first scream rang out. "Hey!" a man shouted. "Quit pinching!" Waves of shrieks and yelps rippled through the crowd, from one wall to the other, back and forth. "Who's running around? Settle down," someone had hollered. "Who's laughing? This isn't funny." "Ow! Who stepped on my foot?" Despite security guards urging to calm down and keep their cool, the crowd became more and more agitated until, finally,